I believe it's just the skills we need to live in the world right now. That's all. Simply, that's it. Okay. Yeah.
The skills we need to live in the world right now.
Right now, yeah.
Great. So digital entrepreneurship then. Let's make the jump from data literacy to digital entrepreneurship. What would you say is your working definition?
So digital entrepreneurship for me is the act of transforming people's way of living using technology. So transforming everyday living using technology. So it could be something that exists before. It could be doing it better using technology. It could be a blue ocean. It could be entirely new thinking using, like, going into the deep side of their digitization thinking or technology, using things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. But either way, in the simplified side that we're using, digital entrepreneurship is how you look at it. Look at Zoom. Let's not even go far. Look at how this is what digital entrepreneurship is all about. And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you can't have a summit until people gather into a room and have to travel far and wide. I'm sure there are we have people who are not even within the same time zone as us, and we can all come together and share mind. And I like to say, there have been different faces to things in this world. There was a face of industrialization. There was a face of globalization. The phase we're in now is digitization. And so anybody who wants to run a business that is not at the foundation of it, have some form of digitization, is not ready for this time. So digital entrepreneurship, again, is a way of making better how people live their lives right now.
Making better how people live their lives right now. So digital entrepreneurship is should I say the coming together or the
for those that are writing
or involving technology in our businesses. Sorry? For those that are writing,
for those that are writing, I wish I would just define it as the act of transforming people's way of living using technology. It's an act of transforming people's way of living, like we are transformed now using technology. That's what an entrepreneur, you want to make. As an entrepreneur, you are trying to change something, you're trying to do something better. So using technology to do it, then you're a digital entrepreneur. That's it.
Great. So you're a digital entrepreneur when you use technology to make things better. So let's separate the both topics. I know you've clearly shown us how they intersect and how they go hand in hand. But let's just drill down a bit into digital literacy. So if you were to rate currently the level of penetration or digital literacy penetration in Africa, you can choose whichever African country. We're in Nigeria right now, so we can touch Nigeria later. But can we look at what you would call the literacy levels or literacy rates right now, digital literacy rates in Africa?
Thank you, Somto. Digital literacy rate in Africa is pretty low, and I'll split it into two. A lot of people, I'll say we have about, last data I read from McKinsey said about 21% of people have smartphones. Now, smartphone means that a lot of people connect to the internet using mobile. Now, with smartphone penetration, meaning that we have that maybe 30% of people using other channels to actually connect to the internet. Now, if you say, your question again, say that what's the level of penetration? Now, there are two types of, I think people always misunderstand digital literacy as just some people just being able to be on Twitter and just scrolling and tweeting whatever they want. Some people think it's just being able to log on to Instagram. If we define, let me go back to the real definition we said, if we define digital literacy as the required skills needed to live in the world today, which means that skill set in researching, skill set for education, skill set in finding the information you need. And sometimes it requires going beyond the surface of the internet and drilling deep into articles and drilling deep into resources that are not on the first page of Google. A lot of us, I'm sure if we're going to say by the raise of hand, how many people actually go to page 3 of Google to search for something? I'm sure a lot of people will be guilty. How many people go to Google Scholar to read up about a topic, about the research behind the topic, not about, because the internet is a melting pot of different views. It's a melting pot of different things. You might want to Google a word. Seeing it in Oxford Dictionary online is also very different in what you see in Urban Dictionary. So if we say that people are digital literate, where are they sourcing information? It's beyond, it has to go beyond just staying on Twitter all day or staying on Facebook all day or spending all your time on Instagram to calling yourself a literate person. It's like school, right? It's like you start from nursery to primary to college, to high school, to university, to PhD, to master, like, you know. And so the literacy level in Nigeria, I'll say it's in its primary school stage. That's what I would call it, because a lot of people do not have the wherewithal or do not even understand what it takes to source the right information online, and they use the internet or they use their literacy as a sim for things that I don't think it's adding a lot more value to the youth. Yeah.
I like how you separated it, because I was reading an article the other day, and the author was trying to distinguish the difference between the current generation being tech savvy and tech dependent. And I'll say you just explained tech savvy, and I'll change tech savvy to digital literacy. So tech savvy is your understanding of technology and your ability to roll with technology, adapt and evolve with technology. Tech dependency is that, oh, I need technology to survive. I need scrolling on Twitter, doing the basics. And I like the way you told me that, and told the audience that the basics is not literacy.
To add to that, there are too many young people, like say, that leave school now and they say they want to intern. And the next thing you say that, how well do you know how to use technology? They'll tell you very well. They can't use Excel. They can't use Word. They can't use PowerPoint in a very different way. They can't schedule a meeting, a calendar meeting on Outlook. Right? These are not, I'm serious. They cannot attach, they can't use Canva. They can't use many resources that is needed as a basic level in a global firm. And then you come and say you're a digital literate because what? Because you spend 12 hours on Twitter or you spend half your time on Instagram. So I think one of the things I want us to be very clear on this session is that digital literacy is not how much time you spend on social media. It's digital literacy is being able to build a core unique set of skills for the conference, the summit we're on right now is called the Future of Work. A core level of a special unique set of skill sets that is valuable in the future, that is valuable to employers, that is valuable to global firms. And that's what digital literacy should be.
So I'm sure a lot of people just started Googling the word Canva to make sure that
I'm sorry, Canva is a kind of tool.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just saying, like, I like the fact you're dropping a lot of information together. But I just love something you said right now. You talked about something as basic as using Excel, as setting up meetings. And I like the way you're taking digital literacy from a very organic standpoint. You're not going into you must surf the web. You must know how to, you mentioned earlier about research, but research is a part of it, but there's another part of it, like the technology in your hand. How well are you optimizing that? Is that a sense of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think that's exactly, a lot of people tend to want certain gadgets, but we don't even use 10%. We don't use 10% of what is possible with this gadget. So sometimes these gadgets are wasting. So let me say you use, people will say, I want an iPhone. And there's so much an iPhone can do for you. In the olden days, people keep diaries. You have a book, you keep your diary, you journal on it. You don't need to do any of these things. There are apps where you could journal with that will pull together. There was a time I was using an app called Momento, which will pull together your thoughts that you put on Twitter, your information you retweeted on, you reposted on Instagram, and just comments you added. So every time, who knows, you might decide in 10 years you want to write a book or you want to write a biography, and pulling together all those thoughts. Digitization has helped you put them together in a way that Notes. How many of us have the notebooks we were writing on when we were in secondary school? But cloud has allowed us to retain information 5 years ago. Cloud has helped us retain pictures from 10 years back. And a lot of my pictures when I was in high school, I can't find them anymore. But with cloud services and data and mobile phone technology, we can keep all of these things. But there's so much more that these tools are meant to do. So if we are not maximizing it, especially in this side of the world, in Africa, there is so much. A lot of people use mobile phones. I think I saw a video once of young people who use their mobile phone to shoot a video end to end. You see,
yeah, there was a movie like that. There's a movie
yes,
like that.
I see. There is this video editing guru I follow, or maybe some Indian guy, and he uses his video to create his iPhone or his Android or whatever mobile phone he uses to create amazing Photoshop videos and just change things. And he has, how many followers does he have online? I think if we can't call ourselves literate in something if we're not maximizing the resources in our hands, and if we're just using it for the basic. When a lot of people use their phone just for messaging and calls, you could use the basic kind of phone for that, but every new version of a phone that comes in, we want it. Meanwhile, these cameras are enhanced in a way to capture pictures the level which a Canon camera would have usually done. Back to just to make it simple, your question is, I think if we're not maximizing and understand, how many of us even pick up the when you buy a gadget, the manual to understand what it does?
They just plug and play.
It's so when we're talking about digital literacy, it has to be a conscious and intentional thing. Like, what can this do? How can I? Because those that are able to move into the world tomorrow, and those that are able to prepare for them for the next decade, are those that you can only find new ways to use something when you've already exhausted the way it really is. Let me see how to simplify that. When you try to dance, right? If you're learning a certain dance, you need to learn the basic step before you start to add your style into the basic steps. Now, it's only when we learn the basics and learn how it thoroughly works, we can then put our flow, we can then enhance it. And that's why it seems like the West is always ahead of us, because they are intentional about learning. They are intentional about what can this do? What does it do right now? How can it do it better? You look at people who like say, why is pictures on WhatsApp being compressed and it doesn't come with the same quality? How can I make camera? Like it's that simplicity of knowledge. Is like you first understand how something works. What people say, a lot of people don't know, but I studied physiology, medical physiology. Now I run a fintech firm. Now, why is that important? Everybody, what does physiology mean? I say physiology is the study of the human body, how it works.
Yes.
Basic, how it works. How does it work? How does your brain work? How does your liver work? How does your heart work? How does your kidney work? Now, if you do not understand how something works, then medicine now is the pathophysiology of the body. Pathophysiology means that what's wrong with it. If you know how something regularly works and you go in there and you realize that it's supposed to be working like this, but it's working like that, then you know what to do to fix it. And so I like to connect that. I like to connect that if we do not understand and drill deep into what digitization tools we have around us, and these tools, softwares, gadgets, hardwares, using Instagram, like the way people have used Instagram for business and used it in an amazing way. If you do not understand how these things work, we won't know how to disrupt it. And I think that's one of the things I want all of us to take out of here today, is being intentional about the learnings and also intentional about what we want to pick up out of all the tools available for us right now.
Brilliant. I heard something that I want to see if, as also both a moderator and part of the attendees, I'm hearing an undertone of have a curiosity mindset. You need to be curious about a lot of things. You need to be curious. Like digital literacy is only enhanced and incubated in the place of curiosity. So I love the example you gave about the manual, and I also love the example you gave about before you can evolve or improve on something, you have to totally understand the total functionalities and then find out where the problem is or where it falls short. And basically, digital literacy is you need to continuously push the envelope through curiosity and learnings. And that's amazing for me. I'm naturally not a curious person, but I don't want to be left behind. So I'm going to develop a curious mindset moving forward. And thank you for that.
Thanks
okay,
for
so
let's
do a bit of role playing now. So this is not role playing. You are a CEO. You run a fintech firm. How does digital literacy play when you are selecting people to work in your team?
How does digital literacy play? Okay, that's a great question. So it's so important for people to have understanding of where the world is right now and where it's going to have an outlook to where it's going to. And now it's even more important in this season we're in COVID, because if the kind of skill people, we heard of Access Bank and we heard of several other companies we didn't hear of that let go of their employees. What changed? Why were these people necessary just 2 months ago? Then suddenly, I'm saying, why were those roles necessary just recently as January and February? And suddenly, March, April, May, those roles are no longer necessary. Why? Because in this time, things are transforming in a way that if your skill sets are not beyond the basic, if your skill set is not required let me try and frame my thoughts in a way that people that are writing can write. Like, if your skill set are not sustainable, then you need to have a rethink of whatever career or whatever job you're doing right now. And the skill set that are required now, beyond, it's everybody, we're talking about digital literacy, but there's certain kind of skill set that are very important that can only add on to digital literacy. So when you say, what are the kind of people I'm looking for on my team? Like if you're choosing a team, critical thinking, right? People are very robotic in the way, sometimes a lot of times you see Nigerian employees or you see people in Nigeria and they are one way with instruction. Like you give them instruction and they just attend to it with that, no creativity. Or you see someone, many times I enter into estate and they're opening the boot and closing it. And I wonder, why? What did you check? If I was carrying guns under my car seat, how would you find it? Like, the skill set that are required now are people who are creative, people who are curious, like you said, people who they're not ready to be spoon-fed, people who are ready to change things within the team. And those who use data is key. Those who use data to make decisions. I'm going to repeat that. Those with the ability to use data to make decisions. Because in this new season, there are too many information is being pushed to us, right? Too many. You want every day you're scrolling through pictures, hundreds of pictures. Every day as a business, you're being given several information that you don't even understand. And so you need people, even if it's customer service. How do I pull all of this data and use it to make a decision? How do I automate things? The skill set that is required in every team right now is people who are self-starters, people who are creative, people who are able to use data to make decisions, people who are actually going to disrupt the status quo. So you're like, why I just collated this data? People are going to give the business owner or their manager use data to back up their suggestions. Like usually you say, why don't we do things like this? No, not go beyond that. I just pulled out the data, all the information, all the complaints, all the calls, all the Twitter complaints, and I realized that 80% of our complaints is in logging in. 10% of our complaints is that people, you are using data, and 15% of this, you're not just going to see one person, two people, some people called and said that they couldn't log in, and another person said this. It's not like that. So you're going to have to sieve all the information, bring it together as one. Then now strip it to then be able to share and give information to those leaders. So if you're looking for people who, the kind of skill set and kind of employees to you or teammates or even founders you need in the businesses going forward, it will be people who are curious, people who use data to support their decisions, and people who actually want to change the status quo, meaning that they are not robotic. You don't give them instruction and they say, this is how they do things. I just collect the data and dump it there. What is that data saying? And that's what the kind of people we need right now.
Brilliant. So at this point, I just want to do a quick recap for those who may just have joined us. I've been talking to Tomilola, and we've been talking about digital literacy and digital entrepreneurship. There are a couple of things that I believe are important to remember. One that I really loved was the fact that she opened her eyes to see that digital literacy is just beyond scrolling on social media. That does not give you a certificate of digital literacy. And the example she gave was as simple as, do you work an Excel sheet? Can you book a meeting with Google? And a simple rudimentary tasks that technology is used for, can you do that? So digital literacy is not exclusive to your ability to surf the web alone. And she alluded to some drawbacks, meaning that we're in a digital age, and if you can't show how quick you are to adapt to the digital demands, then you'll be left behind. You'll be left behind in terms of employment. You'll be left behind in terms of understanding what is going on generally in society and in community. She talked about how we don't go beyond page 1 of Google, or don't check Google Scholar. I can't remember the last time I checked Google Scholar. I think it was when I was doing my dissertation. But she just helped us understand that it's more robust than what we think it is right now, and we need to be a bit more curious and intentional of how we go about understanding digital technology and being a part of it. Now, the question that comes to mind: who is responsible for advancing the cause of digital literacy in Africa?
Who is responsible
for that?
So, before I answer that question, there was something you mentioned while you were doing a recap, and you mentioned something about drawbacks. And I wanted to highlight, when you're talking of drawbacks, I wanted to highlight lots of drawbacks that people forget to understand. With digitization comes that there's information security, information exposure. A lot of people forgetting that I'm putting so much out there and there's risk to me. There are times when people just it's so easy to understand someone's total life right now just by what they do. Some people will go into a place and check in on Facebook. So that consciousness is important. Another thing I wanted to mention, when you say about the kind of people you have in team, communication, there are two types of communication. We all know that there's verbal and non-verbal. Now, the thing about digitization is that you need to be very careful about your tone and the communication style you use. There's a drawback in if you said, okay, yeah, to someone physically, you can't use that same way to just type, because it's so easy to be misunderstood or to seem like you're cold when you're just typing. Another thing is that there's so much lack of independent ideas. We're so brainwashed. We don't realize that every day we're saying things. So your brain is only giving you information or giving you any kind of creative ideas based on what is seen. And what is seen every day is Facebook, social media, or even online, even Google. So there's no time to actually, for your brain to seek within and then be able to extract information that is from within you. So much kind of groupthink, so much lack of independent ideas, a lot of plagiarism and IP theft, conscious and unconscious. And so that's one of the things I think we need to be the bigger drawbacks of digitization. Now, to go to the question, who is responsible? I think everybody, but first I would say both from the individual and the macro, from the micro and the macro. From the macro, I think the government has its responsibilities, very, very heavy responsibilities in making sure that they build the right policies to drive digitization, digital literacy. It's not okay for schools, for teachers in schools not to have the right skill sets. It's not okay for them not to even know how to use computers. It's not okay for them not to know how to teach their students to dig into the right resources and research. And on that note, it's like knowledge is being passed, right, from we all use that for the region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration, and knowledge is being passed from. So it's impossible for you to pass knowledge as a teacher or as an educator if there's nothing, if you have nothing. And it's so much like a lot of educators and teachers in this side of the world do not have the knowledge to pass on. In fact, they always allude to the students or the youth that they know more about technology. Now, the technology that we say these young people know, we've already identified and we've already emphasized the fact that it's just at the basic level, nothing to help you compete on the global scene. So there's the responsibility of the government to ensure that the standard of education and the standard of the educators is global. It's competing. It can compete with the global scene. And developing countries or countries with challenges such as ours it's almost impossible to get the quality that you get in countries like Japan, countries like China, even if you're not mentioning countries, even a lot of countries in Europe, Finland, and all of those countries. And so when we are aware of those limitations, it's then up to us as individuals to go the extra mile and seek this knowledge. There's the role of the government, there's the role of the educators, but being aware of your environment, being aware of the things that the limitations you have based on where you are, I think it's now also the role of the individual to go outside of their sphere of comfort to learn these things. If it's whatever it would take to learn, it's what we need to do, because you know that you need these skills. It's not available, but wherever you need to do to be able to compete with global people. I like to say compete globally because I see, we said before digitization was globalization, and what globalization did was that it puts every country was competing the way companies compete. What does that mean? If you want to work in Facebook, you're not just competing with Nigerians or competing with the same people with the same tool set. You're competing with people from India. You're competing with people from Korea. You're competing with people with China. And there's limitations to roles. The day this hit me so badly, I was doing my MBA in Singapore, and I had this flatmate who was being interviewed as a marketing manager for Uber. Now, this story is important because it was the day he hit me that if we do not get our act right, we are going to be shortchanged as Africans. And what then happened was, part of the interview process as a marketing manager in Singapore for Uber was that she was supposed to write a blog article. Now, write a blog article. Everyone else, every candidate will go around trying to write the most creative blog article, right? Yeah. So I assume that's what you know, trying to think.
That's what I'll do.
And by the time you finish writing the amazing one that you felt very confident about, you will go to the interview on that day, very confident about the blog article. Guess what my friend did? She went on their current blog and built a whole new blog. She coded a whole new blog. That was when it hit me that she's Indian. I was mind blown. It was not a story. So imagine if you were on that same interview process. You're not even in the game. That's what you just realized, that you were running up and telling your friends, I'm being interviewed, I'm going to the next level. You were not even in the game. The person that is competing with you did not write one blog article. She went on their blog and realized that it's not good enough and coded a brand new blog. So you meaning that from images to different articles, she wrote everything. So by the time she was not going with one article, she was going with a new blog. So that was when I realized that so I started telling myself that if you're not going to bring your A game, like go big or go hard or go home. So if you don't think if you're not thinking at that level, you would always lose out. Now, that's why I say that it's beyond, when we say digital literacy, it's beyond saying, okay, fine, write a nice blog post. And you go online and you go and read up a lot and write a nice blog post. She had coding skills. The skill set she was proving there was beyond creativity. It was a level of digitization that I didn't have. And so back to your question, who is responsible? Yes, there's a responsibility of the government. There's a responsibility of educators, but the government is responsibility for power, and we all buy generators. The government is responsible for water, and we all have pumping machines. The government is responsible for many things, and we know we have to do it ourselves. So I think we all have to be responsible for our lives, for our role in progressing and just doing our part in making sure that the nation moves forward. Yeah.
That was very instructive, in terms that the buck stops with you. Yeah, you have the government, you have educators, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. That story, when you told me that story, I'm like, wow, I really don't want to go for an interview at the moment, because I'll just be paralyzed. But that shows you the level.
No.
That shows you the level of thinking behind, and that also shows you let me finish that thought. The level of thinking behind an individual who has been exposed digitally to understand that it's just beyond the face question, or just beyond the first level of the problem, seeing beyond that. And that's really what the digital transformation does. It makes you look at not just one problem in, but 1, 2, 3, 4 problems in, and how you can use the technology to answer those problems. That's an amazing
Thank you for
story.
that, Somto. Thank you for bringing that together. But that's just how I want us to see that it's way beyond the little skill set. It's beyond all. It's our responsibility to go below the surface and dig deep and research. Well, sometimes we see a software. How does it work? What's the logic behind it? What's the algorithm behind it? And we need to go beyond that
So I have a question. I have a question because, and I'm sure a lot of people might feel like me. I'm just being honest right now. I don't know how to code to save my life. Now, you just gave an example of coding being one of the most principal or primary foundations that one should look into. How important is coding right now? Because if you follow the sessions that we had, we were talking to Tess, and she said, look, yeah, coding is important, right? But not everybody should run to coding. The conversation we just had now, honestly,
No, I don't think that coding is important.
I start learning how to code tonight.
No, Somto. I think what I would like to say is that I don't think coding is important. I don't code. Now, imagine, it's mind blowing. I run a tech company. Half of what we do is my team, 70% of my team are people who are coding, but I do not code. Now, I do not think coding is important for me to run the company. I think it's in knowing where your strengths lie, but being the best where your strengths lie. Now, it's not in going and in being everything. Knowledge in everything is good, but drill deep in something that your strengths lie. So nobody should outwork you or out-knowledge you where that strength is. And that's why, so the future of work is people who are subject matter experts, who are not generalists. It's not someone who knows, who doesn't know one single thing very well, but knows everything on the surface. That's where we need people who are subject matter experts in their field. We need people who are drilling deep into what they need to know. So when I say I don't code, it's ridiculous, but it's not also ridiculous, because what is coding? Coding is just, it's a logic, it's a way of thinking that you're not putting. I know what I want. The team is just bringing down my ideas. And I also know, but I've also learned, almost like an apprentice, know what I do not want. I might not be the one. Yes, because the higher you go in every institution, in every sector, the less you need to do the dirty work. But also, it's important to know what is required. So you do not need to code if that is not your area of expertise or what. I mean, I don't expect our our lead in Staring for Greatness now to go and learn to code for what? When she can, at time, I think we need to also understand that we only have 24 hours and time is very valuable. So to channel that time into the one that will, into the best, or the things or the actions that will bring the most result, and outsource the others, right? Outsource, learn to, there's something they teach in MBA, they say make or buy. How do you know, should I make this myself, or what's the opportunity cost of spending the time to make this myself, or is it easier to just buy it? So every company always has to decide, should I build this thing myself? Should I just outsource it? And I think we should think about that as, even as individuals, this task I'm doing, is it more profitable for me to outsource it and I'll be able to get more value of my time doing other things? And so coding is not one of it. But if you're thinking in a certain line and you've researched it and coding is important, by all means, learn the basics. Yeah.
Great, great. I like that. You just helped a lot of people deal with anxiety right now, thinking, wow, I need to go start learning.
I don't know how to code.
I also really enjoyed the brief segue you took, where you explained the importance of being a matter expert, a subject matter expert. There's an article I was reading from the Harvard Business Review, and they analyzed it almost in the best way. They called it the T-shaped career path. Meaning, in the early parts of your career, you be the top side of the T. You know, you're broad in everything. But the later you go in your career, you need to be the lower part of the T, which digs deeper to a particular subject matter. And that's the only way you can differentiate yourself. So brilliant. So we've kind of like gone over the bridge. And so I want us to jump a bit into the digital entrepreneurship part. And I think we did that pretty well when you started to talk about the fact that you're not a coder yourself, but in your team, you have a lot of people who do that. The first question I'd love to ask, from where you sit right now, what are the major misconceptions surrounding digital entrepreneurship? Like the major misconceptions, things people think about when they want to become an entrepreneur and think about it from a digital perspective. What are the biggest misconceptions you've seen, and how would you want to correct that today?
That's a good question. I think thinking from my experience, what are the biggest misconceptions? Let me start with the simple or the fun. People think it's just about speaking on panels and being on social media and having your picture everywhere. Like, I think it's the one of the biggest. People think it's all fun and fame. It's not. And I think that not everyone should be an entrepreneur. And let's not romanticize that idea of an entrepreneur. And there are people who are going to be very successful, C-level executives in global companies. And they will play on the same level with entrepreneurs. So let's first say that it is not compulsory everyone is an entrepreneur. And I think there's so much misconception about what entrepreneurship is about. And so the biggest thing is a lot of people always assume that it's just a level of fame and being in the media. That's the first one. The second thing that is big, we already addressed it, is that you need to learn how to code or you need to learn how to do this. No, you don't really have to. You just need to know your onions, know what exactly is required in that space. And that's important. The third thing I say is the biggest drawback of a digital entrepreneur is that you need to be, there's so many things you can do. I think there's so much hype around social media marketing. Be your own boss in social media marketing. There's so much more you can do in being a digital entrepreneur beyond just being a social media content creator on social media marketing. These are amazing skills, but there's so much about UI, UX designers, building tech companies, doing things. Like I said, digital entrepreneur is someone who sees a way of life and decides to use technology to make it better. And if you think from that way, then you'll be able to see through a lot of these misconceptions. And it's challenging building a company anywhere. And so that challenge does not change in when digitization is involved. And another bigger misconception, especially in my field, in fintech, is that once technology is all that is required, once you build the right product, once you have the best technology, technology would not sell itself. You still need the marketing skills. You still need sometimes the offline channels. You still need the product skills. That you still need the finance skills. You still need the business skills, how to run a business. And technology would not just, you won't just say, oh, I've built the best technology and then everybody will come to you. You still need to market it. You still need to put it out there. And so people always misunderstand that you still need to learn how to learn the art of distribution. One of my mentors in MTN once said, he said, availability will eat quality for breakfast. What does that mean? He said that if you need Coke, right, and every time you go to the shop next to you, Coke was not in stock because Coke's distributors did not find its way down to Abuleg, by where this person needs a bottle of Coke. And every time he goes there, what they said is available is Pepsi. One day in the heat of the sun, when he's looking at a chilled bottle of Pepsi, no matter how much he likes Coke, he's going to pick that Pepsi up and he will drink it. And sooner or later, he will forget that he likes Coke and start to drink Pepsi. So one of the biggest misconceptions, like I will repeat, is that you need to, once you have the best product, everybody will flock to you as a digital person. No, you need to learn the art of marketing, the art of distribution, the art of finance, and every other thing to build a sustainable company as an entrepreneur. That's it. I think there's a comment here that is important to highlight that someone is talking about, a lady, Fatima Lawson, and I think he's right. She said, skills, work, and concentrated. I missed it. Okay, so we have to be careful how we talk about skills we need to outsource. We are leaving the ravages of that practice here in the US when we outsource a lot of the essentials. I do understand where she's coming from, and I think it's an important, I think something is gone, and I think it's an important comment to highlight. But I think it's also important to note that, like, when we're talking from a national perspective, we are talking about knowing something and drilling deep into that. So if you are in manufacturing, you also can't be in finance. You can't run your own, you can't be your own payment gateway and be your own marketing person and be your own stuff. As a company, as an individual, you still have to outsource certain skills. You can't be your own FedEx to be distributing, to be doing the logistics for your company. So it was in that light that we're talking about drilling down into something and outsourcing the ones that is not your focus area. But as a nation, as a sovereign, I think the point she's making is very important when you're talking to government and sovereigns. As a whole nation, it's important to be what the world has shown us during this pandemic is important to be self-sufficient. But we are talking to individuals within that sovereign. They are going to be individuals who are subject matter experts and in whatever they are doing. So Fatima, thank you for that. It's very important to highlight the difference of outsourcing from an individual perspective and a sovereign perspective.
Thank you, Tommy. Somto has faced one of the barriers we have in Africa, power supply. And so yes, its generator also went off, but it will be back soon, I hope. Yeah. But I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I've been writing down points, and I like how you've been able to emphatically show the need for people to actually take ownership of their own learning in terms of digital literacy and how they're applying that even for entrepreneurship. I think I'll open up Q&A now so that we actually hear from the audience if they have any questions, and we'll take it from that. Any questions?
There's a question, yeah. I think there's a question already on the, it says, when we say that someone has an entrepreneurial spirit, what really do we mean? That's a great question. From Fatima again.
Yeah, Fatima is our, she's the one taking the revamping the curriculum tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I like our questions because it helps us to highlight stuff for other people. Yeah. When they say people have an entrepreneurial spirit, I like to see everything as there's nature and there's nurture. And there are people who do maybe based from families and from family history and all of that, definitely they are very business driven, and there are people that are administrators, and one is not greater than the other. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about entrepreneurship that I was trying to highlight. People assume that because you're an entrepreneur, some people assume that it's better. Other people assume, oh, I'm working a 9 to 5. I'm not an entrepreneur like you. It is wrong. And I think that there is room for both. There's room for those that will take the crazy ones, those who will take that risk. And a lot of people fail. And also there's room for administrators who their skill set is in sustaining what you've built. A consultant came one time in my company and tried to do like a personality analysis for my company. And she told my team, and she said, one of the biggest challenges you would have with her. I was very upset because I was like, why are you saying that? I didn't even know that about myself. So one of the biggest challenges you will have with her is that once she feels as if she solved something, she'll be curious for another thing, like, what next? Like, entrepreneurs are people that are like, you know what, they're already bored. Once they feel as if they cracked it and the business is operational and everything, like, they are not trying to crack something again. They're going. Some people will get bored. Meanwhile, there's some people that's the next phase. That's where, and I think every entrepreneur, like I say, if you're trying to build a sustainable business, that's when you know how to get out of your own way, right? That's when you know that, you know what, the next phase for this company, to take this company from where it is to the next level, it needs an administrator, it needs a CEO who is just going to build it to the next level. I'm no longer, there are different skill sets needed for different phases of building of entrepreneurship. So there is, so like I said, there's nurture, but I think that nature also, everyone, we can build skill set for anything. But I think that it's also important to stick where you are a natural, because it's easier to go, if you are a natural at something and without trying, a lot of people like to use the footballers, without trying, you're a natural 6. By the time you make more effort, you had a 4 and you're 10, you're 10 over 10. But if you are a 2 in maths and you then, every effort you make, you add 4, you still be a 6, right? So the same effort with someone who is by nature something, and the same effort who is by nature will not give them similar results, right? It might give you a pass if you are nurture, but it might not give you the same results. So it's very just important that we function in where we should be. But I don't think that there's something like an entrepreneurial spirit. I think that there are people who are more risk takers, and then it's just to know yourself. I think a knowledge of self and a self-awareness is necessary to determine whether it's nature or nurture for you. But I think nothing is impossible. Even from a nurture perspective, you can become and have an entrepreneurial spirit in a way that you pass it on to even your generation, and there was nobody before you that was.
Thank you. Somto is here, so I'll hand back over to him. We're just looking at some of the questions that come in, and she was responding to what it meant to have an entrepreneurial spirit. So
great. So I guess sorry guys, there was a bit of technical issues, so I'm back. So the one thing I wanted to talk about, where I sort of trailed off where it happened, was I wanted to ask, are there specific problems that are unique to digital entrepreneurs that are not unique to the normal entrepreneurs? So we still have some people that will swear off going digital with their business, that still swear by the brick and mortar approach. That's why you still have some malls still saying, look, I'm not going to overly go digital. I like that my store is a roadside store. Is there any problem unique to digital entrepreneurs? And what would you say to the person who wants to remain a non-digital entrepreneur?
That's an interesting question. Are there unique problems to digital entrepreneurs? Yes, very slight. I think all entrepreneurs, every business face certain set of problems that is exactly the same. But there are certain problems that from a digital perspective you face. And those problems include sometimes there's so much things about IP in everything you do, like as a CEO of a tech company, I know there's so much about IP protection. And when because what you're doing, it's important to be able to that's where the core of the thinking, the core of your value sometimes stays within the technology you've built or the technology you're using. So yes, those are some of the challenges. Secondly, it's challenging because in certain communities, it's very human. Personal touch point is important to them. There are people that you have businesses in US or something that you can never pick up a phone to call anyone. There was a time that Uber, we never had anyone that you could call and rant to, right? There was nobody there was no Uber customer service that you could call. But there are certain people, and that was why it was easier for us to connect to that for businesses like Uber to connect to the youth rather than our parents, because it was fully digital. So the challenges of digital companies or digital businesses is also the fact that there's a learning curve for different segments of the market, and that learning curve means that they might not be able to capture all, or there's so much they need to do to bring these people on board. And then your second question, Somto, can you repeat it?
So I said, what would you say to a person who is a non-digital entrepreneur and wants to remain that way?
The challenge with someone who is not a non-digital entrepreneur is that there are situations that would knock you, that you won't prepare for. And I have a very great example. I'm sure most of us know Primark. Primark is one of the biggest retail stores in UK, in many countries. I buy things in Primark. Primark is one of the biggest. They were making, I think their retail, they were making about $650 million. Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think on a daily basis across, if it's daily or monthly, across their stores.
Their retail chain.
Yeah, across. And one of the things that what COVID did for them was that because they had no online store, like Zara and all of them, when the lockdown happened, they went from 650 million to zero. And their inventory continues to rise. And now, it wasn't like they didn't have competitors and all of them that were going digital. They just were rooted in the fact that we are who we are, this is us. And if no one can come into our stores, that's it, because they were very proud at it. And it's not like they didn't have the knowledge. They just wanted to remain brick and mortar. But no one planned for the pandemic. No one knew. And that's what this situation has shown us, that you just need to have it as a plan B. Imagine if they've already had a store, even if they insisted that they wanted brick and mortar, if they had an online store that was just ready to be kicked in. Imagine how much Amazon continue to grow. In fact, of how many companies were failing or losing share price, Amazon continued to grow because it was totally, what is Amazon? Bookstore. It started out just as a bookstore. Instead of being a bookstore that you walk into, it's just an online bookstore. And that was where Amazon started. But Amazon then became what it is just by taking physical brick and mortar bookstores to becoming online, to become digital. And that's who the richest man in the world just leverage technology to take away brick and mortar. So I think anyone who is saying, I want to remain brick and mortar right now, well, the risk is too high, but it's all up to anyone. It's all up to the person, but the risk is too high. Looking at Primark as a prime example.
Primark is a great example. Like you said, they went from £650 million a month to zero. Yeah. And I think that's the main problem. As much as you want to remain true to yourself, you need to remember that the world is moving at such an alarming rate that you need to also be able to cater for those that you're in business for. So if the people you're in business for are moving on digitally, then the onus is on you to move on digitally as well. It's only natural. So I want to quickly go to some of the questions that have popped in. We have one here from Tomilola. She said, thank you for this session, Tomilola. You mentioned about an app that draws thoughts written on social media platforms. Please, what is the name of the app? And her second question is digital literacy sector or occupational specific? For instance, what kind of skills, specs of digital skills do I need to gather to develop as an economist? So she's talking about the unique digital skills that match certain fields. Are digital skills generic, or are they unique skills?
Okay, thank you, Molola. The first question is, it's called Momento, but I would generally advise that just Google journaling apps. What it did was that if you're journaling, and sometimes some of us don't realize that social media or Twitter and all of those things are just a form of public journaling. So you can just Google journaling apps, and most of them will be able to pull all your resources, like we said. But the one I was talking about is called Momento. To the second question, they say digital literacy sector or occupation specific. There is with everything. There's a generic one. There's a generic part where there's certain skills that we just need. Everyone needs to know how to use Zoom. Everyone needs to know how to research materials. Everyone needs to know how to use Excel. Everyone needs to know how to create. They're just certain generic skills. But when you're talking about the core sector specific, there are certain things that is necessary for sector specific things. There are certain tools or skills that I need in fintech that you don't need as a development economist, right? And so I don't know what you need as a development economist. I don't know the digital skills, but I definitely know as an individual living in this world right now, there are general skills that we need and we need to build into. And that's just basic understanding of how certain softwares work, and just basic understanding of tools, being able to use several tools available online, and that's it.
So if I could add to what you just said. So for instance, I know there are certain accountants that have to understand how to use Sage and similar applications like Sage, and that is accountant specific. But that doesn't stop the accountants from understanding how to use Excel, because Excel also performs accounting functions. But the app Sage goes into more specialized content and specialized accounting deliverables. So in that case, I'm pretty sure that there are some apps that will be unique to you. And I think, like what Tomilola said, the buck stops on your desk to go and look for those apps, a curious mind, and find out those apps that are unique to what you do. But that doesn't stop you from learning the basics in terms of Excel and other basic Microsoft Suite apps and tools. So we got another question from Benga, and I think Benga is talking to your finance brain right now. Benga says, Tomi, what do you think is the barrier stopping Nigeria from adopting simple technology like M-Pesa, used in Kenya to close, mobile money? Used in Kenya to close the space for bankable citizens. So what do you think it is? I have an idea, but I think I'll keep that to myself.
That question you're asking is we can stay there. So what's stopping Nigeria? What's stopping Nigeria is three things. Mobile money, M-Pesa in Kenya there's something called the mobile money. You could either say it's telco-led or bank-led. Now, when it says that telco-led, meaning that it's the telecoms like the MTNs that will lead the revolution of making mobile money spread across. We'll just turn our mobile phones into bank accounts, right? In Nigeria, they were not given the license to do that. Now, the argument about where the Western world was pushing for Nigeria to allow the telcos to do this is up for argument. I mean, the jury is out on that. I personally, if you understand banking, we know that that's where the money of the sovereign entity. Fatima Lawson said something about looking inwards and not outsourcing everything. Have you noticed that as much as every company can come in and build, Indomie is not Nigerian, many companies, MTN was not Nigerian. Have you noticed that every bank is Nigerian? Every bank, apart from the little city bank, most of the banks, most of the commercial banks is Nigerian, because the one who controls the money controls the nation. So if you allow foreigners come control your money, then they will be able to control the election, then they'll be able to control policies, then you might as well not be a sovereign anymore. So when most people don't see beyond this, and so when the government was restricting the telcos from playing in the finance space, as Kenya has allowed, everybody sees M-Pesa as a success story, because that's what the West. It is a success story, but they also have internally the challenges they are facing with Safaricom, a Kenyan company hosting the bulk of the money of the nation. It's just, it's a political conversation.
Very political. Yeah.
Yes. So
Very
it's
political.
either bank-led or telco-led. And again, if the banks were allowed to do it, but the banks have no incentive, it's very hard to capture the unbanked because the money is small, the resources to serve them is higher. Let me give you a very great example people don't think of from banking. If a bank is going to open up in Ibadan, for instance, it will get a land, either at least it will build this big structure, it will recruit people, it will buy cars. Now it's spent tens or hundreds of millions to do that before they come and market Somto. And Somto finally puts 10,000 naira in GT Bank. 10,000 naira that is Somto's. If Somto gives them 10,000 naira that they finally market him, it is not like GT Bank owns 10,000 naira. So the cost of serving people in banking is so high that it takes them a long time and you need more volume. So you need people with money. So if you're then looking at the lower end of the middle market, like I see, if you're looking at people below the middle class and people at the bottom of the pyramid, are you going to go and build that whole structure in Ikerekiti, right? Or build them every street apart only for someone to come and put 10 naira and then you are just going to run at losses. So the banks had no incentive to do that. And that's where digitization came. What Bankly does is that we're not able to use the M-Pesa was technology that you don't need to build this big land. You don't need the overhead that a GT Bank is. I can use technology to serve these people that it then becomes profitable to serve them rather than a big bank serves them. And that's, I hope, Benga, I've been able to answer your question, but you can see me outside if you have more.
So great. I think at this moment in time, because you sort of like started to talk about what the fintech you manage really does. And I think for as many of us who have listened to you and have felt educated by this conversation, could you tell us a bit more about what your company seeks to solve? Maybe we're giving an opportunity for a marketing pitch, but I'm just trying to say, just give us a bit of an idea.
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, it's, most people on this call are not my target.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, most people on this call are not my target market, but I will just say, so what Bankly is trying to do in a nutshell is be the bank for the unbanked. How? We have 100 million adult Nigerians and only 35 million people have a bank account served profitably by almost 20 banks. What that means is that when there's no identity for the right people, there's no policy, there's no way to create policies because you don't even know them, you don't know their transaction history. If someone wants to take a loan from his bank right now, all his bank needs to do is look at his transaction history, look at how much he earns on a monthly basis. There's data about Somto to give him credit. When people do pay in cash and save in cash, there's no history about them. One of the biggest challenges during this pandemic is that the government have been trying to give incentives to people that are vulnerable. But you don't even know them and they don't even have bank accounts. Imagine if all of us have bank accounts. Everyone has a bank account or everyone has a wallet system that they can get e-money in. It's very simple for the government and there will be less fraud or less corruption. Less corruption to just move 20,000 naira into the account of everybody that is vulnerable, using data to determine who needs it more, right? That's why data is important. But when you don't know it, it's impossible to support them. Then the government started giving out cash. But cash also means that there's so much corruption. There's no trust. Cash has no trackability. So what Bankly is doing is using technology to build a wallet system, to build the M-Pesa of Nigeria. And that's, yes, we are licensed by the CBN right now to do that. And that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. It's a longer
conversation. Amazing. I think you and Benga should have another conversation. I think he has a lot of ideas. And I think it will be a good.
Let Benga take this offline.
But great. But with this, I think we've gotten so much information from you. We've sponged in a lot of critical information and we're very grateful for that. But before we officially close, we have done an hour. Would you give us one final thought? You can give us one final thought on digital literacy, one final thought on digital entrepreneurship, and then your advice for people moving forward in this digital world, this digital new world?
Yeah, thank you, Somto. Generally, I'll just say for digital literacy, I think we should dig below the surface and just be curious about the technology we're using. It's not enough that we are consumers of technology. It's important that we are creators of technology. It's not enough that all of our data sits in the West. It's not enough that all of our phone, even your president's phone, everything he says can be listened to in the US or everywhere else. We are not protected if we keep consuming technology. So we need to learn to start being not just consumers of technology. So we need to educate ourselves so deeply that we know what works and we're able to create technology from this side of the world. That's one. For entrepreneurship, I think I think it's just important to share. I think I've put both in one, is that everyone needs, we need to just be, we don't need to be just consumers of technology. We need to be creators of technology. So that's a call to action for anyone who wants to do something as an entrepreneur, who wants to run a business. Look for something you can do. We shouldn't always consume what is given to us. Let's create something of our own. So that's it.
Great. So, by the way, you said we're not your target audience, but are there some benefits for coming on Bankly? Just for us to know.
I think I would, so that I can run off because I have a 7 a.m. I can send something to the to.
Please do. How we can get in touch with you? That would be great.
Yes, absolutely. I think I will share my contact and everyone can reach out. I'll share my contact.
Thank you so much. So
thank you so much, guys. It was a good time.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So we've come to the end of this session. Please follow Stir for Greatness on Twitter at Stir to Greatness. Please follow us on Facebook, Stirring for Greatness Foundation.